Welcome to part 2 of the Mars episode. If you haven't listened to the first part, I suggest you go back and give it a listen because those are really the early days of Mars. But the Mars story was so interesting, we had to break it into 2 parts, and there's some really fun and surprising things that are going to happen in phase 2 of this story. The Mars bar was this big success. He's now had a couple failures. He needs a success. It's 1934. His father, Franklin, passes away.
Okay.
At the age of 50, and the future of the company in the U.S. is now in doubt. And there's a small number of shares go to Forrest, but most of the shares go to his stepmother, who does not like Forrest.
Ouch.
And so
Okay.
Forrest is pissed. And basically he decides that what he needs to do is just go on a vacation and cool off. So he takes a vacation to Spain. And he saw these chocolate candies made by Roundtree that are called Smarties that don't melt. And he had never saw a candy coating on chocolate. So he decides to take Smarties to America. He returns to the U.S., leaves the UK company in his hands in the number 2, but he needs a supply of milk chocolate. And where does he need to get that? Is Hershey's.
Okay.
But he's brand new. Hershey's is not super interested in doing it. So what he does is he knows the president of Hershey's, his son, Murray, is never going to make it in the Hershey's business. So he offers Murray, he says, hey, you guys sell me this chocolate. I'll make Murray, I'll give him an executive position plus 20% of the company.
Wow. Okay.
So they go, done. Murray's now set up.
Murray's out of our hair.
Murray's out of our hair.
Not our problem anymore.
What they do is they create this candy based upon Smarties.
Wait a minute. Murray, Mars, M, and the candy-coated chocolate
is M&M's.
M&M's. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's crazy. So it was the son of Mars and the son of Hershey's.
Yes.
Who knew?
Right.
That's amazing.
So they need to build a factory, and they want to make it stand out. So how they first package M&M's is instead of in a little bag, remember they used to always come in a tube.
Oh, I remember them coming in a tube, but not in my childhood. That was a sort of a theater thing later on.
But that's how they first came, was in a cardboard tube. That was how they first packaged.
Oh, I kind of do remember that.
Yeah.
And with like a folded, wadded piece of the paper at the end.
Yeah.
Hold it shut. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was first in this. Well, in Canada, I remember them with a little plastic thing on the end. But yeah, they're originally in the tube. So it's 1941. War breaks out in the United States. Factories all across, all industries are dedicated to the war effort. And Hershey's has a real problem here because their chocolate bar for the war effort is a horrible product because it melts and all this other stuff. Mars proposes to the U.S. government M&Ms because of it doesn't melt, and they're literally doing 200,000 pounds a week of M&Ms to the U.S. war effort.
Wow.
Now, I want to pause for a moment because there's a couple of interesting things that I observed in all of this with Forrest. Not only was he a go-getter, he was really observant. And we've seen that over and over again with a lot of folks who've built empires. First of all, he looked at something familiar, the malted milkshake, and said, everybody loves this.
Yeah.
We should make a bar that tastes like this. Right? Brilliant observation. And then he learns from Cadbury that they would do things for local markets, slightly different.
Modify it for the locals. Yeah.
So what he looked at was the Milky Way. He went, well, I should modify that for the UK market. So not only that, he observed this idea from Cadbury, and he observed that the UK market had a slightly different taste preference, made a bar for that. Fantastic. Then when he tried to do a couple of things using his own ideas, they failed. And then he observed when in Spain, right, the Smarties, and went, hey, I could make my own version of that. But it's this whole idea, and we've seen this so often with empires, it's this looking at the market, this observing these things going on. And in his case, it was things going on some in other markets, right?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, just observing those things and then creating his version of it, which I think is just underappreciated.
Do you think his instinct was, this is a weird one because I'm not sure of the mindset. Is the instinct to say, you know what, I just got to get out of here for a while? Or is the instinct, I got to get out of here so I can see new horizons and find something new that I can take advantage of?
That's really,
because I think they both end up kind of in the same place, right? And if you're stuck if you're stuck and you can't find the answer, get out of your own space.
Yes.
And be open.
Yes.
Not even necessarily looking, but just open.
Just be open. We do this with our customers in reviews in the Bold Idea Day because we make them travel to a different place.
Can't be at your place. Yeah.
When you travel into that different space, it puts you into a different headspace. You know, how often have we seen things where somebody's somewhere else? And yes, it's a combination of seeing those other things. But as you said, it's that different headspace. So I think it's a combination of the two. It's really interesting. I'm in a coaching program called the Strategic Coach, run by a guy by the name of Dan Sullivan, hugely successful program. And Dan tells a story of an early business that he had that predated Strategic Coach that went through all sorts of things that created this big challenge and the business was failing. And I never believed this story when I first heard it. And I now believe it because I heard it. I was young. I was stupid. I was naive. Now a little wiser. That one of the first things he did, the business is failing. And one of the first things he did is he and his wife, Babs, went on a 2-week vacation.
Stay tuned. We're going to wrap up this story and tell you how to apply this lesson to your business right after this.
Hey, Rick, how's it going?
Great.
Great.
Yeah, I just had an amazing 90 minutes.
You did?
With the host of the Empire Builders podcast.
Really?
You've heard the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I finally took him up on the starter session.
So you drank the Kool-Aid.
Guzzled it.
How did it taste?
Well, he answered those questions that were keeping me up at night. Now I know what I need to do. So it tasted like strawberries.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, and you can book your free starter session on this podcast website.
Okay, Dave. Say, and they haven't missed a thing.
Let's pick up our story where we left off, and trust me, you haven't missed a thing.
One of the first things he did, the business is failing, and one of the first things he did is he and his wife, Babs, went on a 2-week vacation. And when he came back from the vacation, he was like, here's what I need to do. Like with this instant clarity, here's what I need to do. So, but I just wanted to pause and recognize that because that's the early history of the Mars Corporation. So World War II comes to an end. And so here's the interesting thing. Mars kicked the crap out of Hershey's during World War II. Hershey still sold a lot of chocolate to the Army.
I've got to say Hershey's probably did a better job at product placement in war movies.
Well,
right? There's always the GI giving a Hershey bar to some kid.
Yes. Okay, so here's one of the things I'm going to suggest people do to go back to the Wrigley's episode. Episode 4, in terms of what did Wrigley's do during World War II? Because remember, Wrigley's continued to advertise through World War II. And then what happened as soon as the war ended? Their sales exploded. Mars did not advertise during World War II. The war comes to an end. Sales collapse.
Did anybody even know what M&Ms were?
Like, I really don't know what their success was before World War II. They were released pretty soon before World War II, so I'm going to say probably not. Forrest buys out Bruce Murray, and he hires an ad agency, Ted Bates and Company, to create an advertisement for it. And here's what Ted Bates and Company recommended. Again, radical idea in the late 40s, early 50s. Is the customer is the kids, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
You need to appeal to the parents. It's a 2-punch you need to do here.
Yeah.
And what do parents dislike about chocolate bars?
Yeah, cleaning it off their kids' faces and hands.
Melts in your mouth, not in your hand.
Yeah.
Well, the customers, the kids, you need to appeal to the parents. They launch this campaign. Melts in your mouth, not in your hands. Hershey bar is messy. M&M, no mess. Brilliant friggin' message.
Sure.
1954, Forrest rolls out a national campaign. And it also fits that image of the 1950s where everything's supposed to be, everybody's perfect and clean, pristine, and all that other stuff. So sales start to improve. They immediately launch a peanut M&Ms. And on this one, they do something also really fun. They make the candies the spokespeople.
Gotcha. So this goes way back.
This goes way back. This whole idea of the candies being spokespeople, while it happened recently, it was a relaunch of an old idea. Ads run on kids' program. 1956, they're selling $40 million and they become number 1 in the United States.
All right.
They're
on the backs of the M&Ms.
They're now 3 times the size of the old family business. But Forrest now needs to go back to his sister. Right? Because remember, most of the shares went to the
stepmom.
So he wants to go back now and buy the old Mars company back. So remember, he's been writing this under his old name. 1964, he takes over Mars. merges the companies, does a complete overhaul. And at this point, they're still number 2 to Hershey's. But one of the things they now are big enough is they start making their own chocolate and no longer buying from Hershey. Expand the product line, but they're always looking to Europe for inspiration. So here's one of the things he remembered. His best ideas came when he was looking at other markets. So he's constantly looking to Europe for inspiration. And they create this whole idea of product called fruit chewies. So they see these chewy, fruity candies in Europe, and it fails. And he admits that it's a mistake, and he pulls it off the shelf. But you know what? He still thinks it's a good idea, but he felt like it was maybe mispackaged and mismarketed. So they change the formulation a little bit, and they re-release it. But they re-release it fitting into an idea, an obsession that's working at the time. You know how we talk about this whole idea of looking at the marketplace, and if something is really going on in the marketplace, trying to tie into that?
Sure, yeah.
What was going on in the late 50s, early 60s? What was the big obsession? Going to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So what does he call it? Starburst.
Starburst.
And it explodes.
Wow, okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
He then finds another candy, again, that's going on in Europe. I forget what the name of it was in Europe. He takes it and he rebrands it as Skittles.
Okay.
Yeah, what somebody else in Europe was doing, and he bought the idea and rebranded it.
Okay.
But what Forrest recognizes, oh, wait. Again, anytime he tried to create something brand new, didn't work. When he saw something and kind of reformulated it at work, when he saw something and needed rebranding, he could do it. Like, he became very conscious of where his success lied.
That's really cool.
I think that that's really quite amazing. But when you've got a company that you have 5 of the top 10 in your space, and you're doing something, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only stumble he had is he should have learned from Wrigley. But of course, he couldn't learn from Wrigley because Wrigley was doing it at the same time. But isn't it interesting that we talk about how Wrigley had this success because they advertised during the war. So as soon as the war was over, their sales exploded. Well, one person could argue, well, do we really know that that was the impact? Well, let's take a look at M&M's, right? Didn't advertise during the war, sales collapsed, and they actually ended up with a problem. But, they bounced back with melts in your mouth, not in your hands. Brilliant campaign.
Yeah.
Brilliant campaign.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. I didn't realize that one guy was responsible for all those ideas.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
The dude was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as he understood kind of here's what led to his success. And in many ways, he kept doing the things we talk about doing, repeating the success. This is what led to success. This is what led to success. He kept repeating that success.
Yeah. Very cool.
So really, really cool thing, power of renaming, power of local markets, all of those things is the lessons to be learned in there.
Awesome. Oh, I'm glad you brought us the story of Forrest Mars.
Forrest Mars, yes.
And his Mars bars.
Yeah, and isn't it cool that they are still family owned?
I'm glad to hear that. Maybe they're the Wonka, not the Slugworth.
Yeah, that's it. Now, look, there'd still be a lot of bureaucracy around there. When you're doing that many billions, yeah.
Is Wonka a brand owned by a company like Mars, or is Wonka its own thing?
You know what? We are going to do an episode on Wonka.
All right, I can't wait. I'll get a hat.
It's one that sits around on the edges on a few of these things, and the Wonka story is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's like, is Willie real? Is Willie a real guy?
Willie's not.
Okay, no. All right.
No, but the Wonka bar is kind of fun.
Sure. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Please share us. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave us a big, fat, juicy 5-star rating and review at Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to schedule your own 90-minute empire building session, you can do it at empirebuildingprogram.com.